But if they could get this insight and information on on their unlimited worth, the truth of that, why that is true in an infinitely creative universe, why they have an unlimited ability to reshape the way they look at themselves, and hence change the way they perceive the world, react to the world. And here's probably the most bit of magic that people don't know. Once you change that set point in you of how much you have respect and worth for who you are, life changes the way it treats you. And it meets you with a higher level of respect and worth.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. And whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode is a coach, speaker, and author who's got a new book out, Invincible. We're going to dig into a bit. Please welcome back to the Elev8 podcast, Howard Falco.
Good. It's good to see you again, Tyler.
Yeah, it's great to have you. You got a new book out, Invincible. I want to dive into that. But as I looked at it, one of the first things that I really loved right off the start was this quote: "If you know how powerful you really are, you would never stop smiling." And you kind of smiled when I said that. So that's cool. That's cool too. But tell me more about that, because I think it's so important.
So the whole idea of the book is to empower people to understand how powerful they really are, coming from a new understanding of their mind, and how that dictates so much of our energy and what we experience back from the world. And we don't get taught how our mind works and how it influences our reality. And that's why I'm excited to offer that, because so many people don't know how powerful they are. They don't know what potential is at their fingertips or at their feet or in their mind when they begin to understand it more and take more conscious control of it. So that's what that means. It's a very exciting, inspirational, hopeful idea. Truth, I should say.
What within you made you really want to write this book and share this?
So after putting out my first two books, I Am and Time in a Bottle, and then going into the field and working with so many people in terms of either anxiety, depression, relationship issues, and then on the sports side, seeing how this mental strength work and this work on consciousness and awareness affects performance and results, and how those two worlds blend. I thought after, doing this for 10 or 15 years after my first two books, it'd be great to write a book that shows the formula that I use in helping either athletes or individuals to get to that next level, and then also use the examples from all the successes from people who've actually applied it. So that's where that's where the idea came from.
Love it. One of the things I know you start out with is kind of this realizing potential. A lot of listeners in this podcast are kind of that student, high school to college student athlete range, coaching that range, where I think sometimes what I hear from a lot of coaches, I can see it in them. I can see it in them. The coaches sometimes can see a little more than sometimes we can within ourselves at some of these younger ages, and realizing potential can take a long time. But how do you see that shape with young people and opening up to help them see that?
Yeah, when they're in their teens, they're at their ego's in such a formidable stage where they're just trying to get a handle on who they are, what their capabilities are, where they fit in the world. And the great ones know that more intuitively. It's just embedded in their soul or in their identity, either from genetics or from a nurturing they got when they were younger. That just they know who they are and a little more what they're destined to become. And what I'm hoping is that this work can help educate those who haven't known it to know it, to understand, hey, if you shift these thoughts, if you catch these negative thoughts that arise in your mind without even thinking sometimes, because they've been so conditioned in you, or you've heard it from the world, or you've perceived it from the world, and you can see how that works against you, then you can begin to shift the mindset and start having some ideas or thoughts to replace those that are more empowering, that are more conducive to what you want to experience. But they have to believe they're worth it. They have to believe it's possible. And then they need a really good teacher or a good work to come in to show them how to do it. And that's how I see it. But I've worked with teens, many of them. And while I can tell you a lot of them, have some growing to do and some maturing to do, with the right information, their mindset can change dramatically. And they get excited with this work
Yeah.
because they get it. They
Yeah.
understand it. Their mind hasn't been so conditioned that they don't, they fight it. They
Yeah.
don't fight it. They're open to it.
I've had some feedback in working with that age too. Sometimes after some sessions, to this, kids will say, sometimes it's direct. I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know
Yeah,
I could just, that
exactly.
it's this almost given permission and freedom to, explore that. And I think just like you said, when you if I'm gonna ask you this question a little bit as one of those things, if we could give young people more mentors and people to help them realize that. But if I gave you a magic wand, and overnight things would change in athletic departments in high schools, in colleges, uh, it's a magic wand. um, what would you wave that wand and wish for student athletes and coaches in those environments?
I would definitely wave a magic wand to the coaches and to the people in charge of young people to have them become so aware of how much single thing that comes out of their mouth impacts them. And to be a great coach, you have to go on your own journey of self-awareness. Because if not, you're going to coach from ego, you're going to coach from force, you're going to coach from manipulation. And I have seen that way too much at the high school and collegiate level. And it is ugly. A lot of times coaches will go into the position for a sense of empowerment, and they haven't done enough of the work on what truly inspires a young person. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of fantastic coaches at the high school and collegiate level
For
who have
sure.
saved untold numbers of lives, helped change positively. But there's also a lot of narcissists and a lot of people that don't see the impact of what they're doing to a young person's mind because they're so influential on them. They don't realize what they're doing to harm them maybe for the rest of their life. And so that's how I wave the magic wand to give them this sense of optimism, hope, inspiration, and to really nurture these kids as if they were their own, or nurturing a beautiful plant or flower. I don't mean to sound so kumbaya, but it really takes that kind of care
Yeah.
to help, because everybody's at a different state. Some of these kids can take stronger coaching. Some of them need a little more nurturing and encouragement. That's what I would do with the wand
I
is,
love it.
yeah, help them be more aware of that.
I love it. You said a word that always sticks out to me a little bit ago, worth, helping athletes, discover their worth. And I think you mentioned, dealing with relationships and anxiety and depression. And I think even in some of my own experiences and journeys, when people struggle with that, they struggle with a lot of other things. Can you talk about how important it is to help student athletes find their worth, beyond the sport, and then also kind of create that awareness of an environment where they are worthy?
Yeah, so worth is an interesting thing, and it's formed by the identity through the three main factors of um, nurturing from before they had a consciousness, 0 to 6 years old, how quickly they got picked up from the crib, how hard they had to cry before they ate or had their diaper changed. Little things like that embed in a sense of fight or flight and how much that triggers and ultimately turns into a sense of what they believe their worth is. And then their personal experiences, of course, first relationships with their friends or with girls or with their parents and how they're treated affect their worth. And then, or boys. Um, and then the third and the sneakiest one is genetics. So that all forms this idea of a set point of worth. However, in the mid-teens, when you're starting to develop an ego and starting to ask questions about life, and then, some people ask them when they're in their 30s or 40s when life has gone way offline, right? But if they could get this insight and information on their unlimited worth, the truth of that, why that is true in an infinitely creative universe, why they have an unlimited ability to reshape the way they look at themselves, and hence change the way they perceive the world, react to the world. And here's probably the most bit of magic that people don't know. Once you change that set point in you of how much you have respect and worth for who you are, life changes the way it treats you and it meets you with a higher level of respect and worth. And that is because on a deeper level, life has to meet you with what you believe is true about yourself. That's why self-awareness is so critical to the next evolution in human consciousness, because we have to understand that as conscious creators and how we're creating our reality in so many different ways, shapes, and forms, that it stems from an identity that we hold, which is completely in our control once we realize it's in our control.
Yeah.
And so that get back to Tyler to your question about worth. And there's a specific chapter in the book that goes through and shows you how wherever your set point is on worth, that's the size of the field of your of possibilities for you. So someone who's a 1 or 2 on the scale of 10, their field of possibilities is the size of a softball. They can't go outside of it because the life can't match a 1 or a 2 with something bigger. Someone who's a 5 or a 6, now they're the size of a hot air balloon. And in that circumference is so much more possibility for them. So you hit the nail on the head. It really comes down to teaching worth. And that's why I believe work on this needs to be, education on this needs to be instituted and before kids graduate from high school.
Yeah, I love that. Kind of that narrative about ourselves and what's true about ourselves. There's
Exactly. It's
uh,
everything.
something that caught my eye in the book was this idea. I'd love you to share a little bit about of who you were versus who you are. And I think there's always that in that growth process that is always crazy. There's always this, point where you have to kind of let things go to create space for those next things. But can you talk about that versus that you discuss in the book?
Yeah, you have to let it go if it doesn't serve you, right? Does it serve you to hold on and be angry about something from 10 years ago, or to regret something, or to sit in shame, or to remunerate about what you think you should have, would have, or could have done? That just burns energy and time and hurts creativity. Forgiveness, acceptance, getting back to the moment and realizing that who you were is not who you are unless you allow it to be. And there's plenty of things you want to take from your past and who you were into your present. There's also things you want to look at and say, wow, that version of myself, I don't want to be anymore. But that was a stepping stone to get me here because I had to go through that to become aware of it so that I could change. But now I'm ready to be this version. And I'm going to be very conscious of being that version, even if every instinct in me wants to go the other way because it was normal and comfortable. And that's where I lived in terms of suffering and drama. But that's not who I am anymore. This is who I am. And that is truly, quote, waking up and taking control, conscious control of your
Yeah.
life.
One of the things you also bring up, and it's one of my favorite things that I think is the power of I am statements.
Mhm.
And you talked earlier a little bit about, coaches being able to kind of speak life and those kind of things into kids. Could you talk about kind of the power of I am statements, and then also lean into how coaches can maybe help normalize and teach self-talk?
Yeah. So the our identity boils down to the shortest sentence in the written language, but the most powerful one, which is I am. Because as I said earlier, how you define yourself is going to dictate the energy that goes out of you and the energy life attracts towards you. So taking control of the narrative over the power of I am, let's take, coaching situation, I want you guys to say I am a champion. Well, if they haven't experienced being a champion, they might say it, but that's sort of forcing or swimming against the stream, right?
Yeah.
So, because they may not believe it. And when you don't believe what you're saying, you can say it all day long, but it doesn't hold any creative spiritual power. So, what I like to do is make sure coaches are lined up with the direction they're going, but they can tell their athletes to say, I am becoming a champion. And that puts them in the process. And everybody can say that one. I am becoming a champion. And they
Yeah.
feel it and it starts to embody them and they start acting more like one they start because they believe it.
Yeah.
And then, when they win a championship, then they can say that. But becoming is really powerful because it puts the kids in the process. Um, and I have a whole section in there that where you develop a creed that I've given to all my athletes to help them write these I am statements out so that they know what direction they're going in life. And I encourage all coaches to do that with their athletes is to get them to set the course for who they want to be and to challenge them on whether or not they believe that and they can step into that. And if they can't, then you say, I am becoming stronger mentally. I am becoming stronger physically. And it's just a really good word that interjects the truth of where they are in the process. Um, and then the other thing is to get athletes to recognize when they're talking down to themselves. The great athletes in the world never really truly were self-deprecating. They got angry because that's normal as a high-level athlete. But the way that they shouted it out was, come on, Michael, you're better than that. Or come on, Tiger. It was anger, but it was directed in an uplifting way, with hope and optimism, not with limitation or negativity.
Yeah. Um, I like that becoming, just like thinking about just the dynamics on the team. You maybe your star players versus the other end of the roster, right? It works for both ends, right? You're both becoming, you're working together.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. Just kind of, thinking of a team, looking at a roster.
Yeah.
We're all becoming, and we're all doing it together. So I really like that. I am becoming. You brought up the kind of the journey that coaches go on. Uh, Someone recently had shared several weeks back this quote about how as coaches we can't take athletes on a journey we haven't been on or that we're not going on. And so I liked how you talked about so many coaches, I think, want to sometimes teach or grasp these things to young people, but they haven't done, like you said, that journey and the work themselves on that awareness.
Yeah, and
Um,
the belief part of it. Yeah.
yeah,
Not the physical like winning championships, but the actual belief part in their own life. If they don't believe it about themselves, it's
yeah,
very hard to force it on them.
yeah. How does how are some or what are some things that you've seen maybe done well with coaches that are able to kind of take teams and people on a greater journey than just their schedule and their sport?
Um, you mean in terms of like how they coach their kids?
Yeah, how they're able to do some of the things we're talking about, elevate them, maybe they're going on it with them. Maybe they've really dove into that work and they're able to teach and expand on it with their teams. But
Yeah.
what are some things that you've seen done
Some of
well?
the key things with great coaches is they form a personal relationship with each player. Not a broad relationship as a team member, but an
Yeah,
individual relationship with each player, knowing that each player is different and is going to be motivated differently and wants their own connection and their own safety space with the coach.
yeah,
Just to know that the coach knows them and know, because then they'll go through a brick wall for you when they know that you respect them and you are grateful for them and they're grateful for you. So that's one of the things I've seen great coaches do. They're also never negative. That doesn't mean they don't tell them the truth,
right.
right? Like saying we didn't play our best today is a truthful statement. It's not negative. It's just the truth, and then telling them what can we do to get better? What can we learn from this? How can each player improve going into the next game? What kind of goals can you set? And then having a meeting with each player on what those goals are and what they're going to do. Like that's powerful.
Yeah,
They make the time to do that. So those are a few of the things that I've seen. And then just the way that the coach carries themselves in terms of their confidence, in terms of their belief. It's almost like the captain of a ship in a storm, right? The crew members are rowing and the storm is blasting them. And who are they looking at to see whether or not they're going to make it? They're not looking at each other because they're all scared. They're looking at the coach. And if the coach is steely-eyed, at the helm of the ship, they're going to feel more confident that they can row through it. And so I think a great coach really always exhibits that kind of, I got us, don't worry. There's going to be some ups and downs this season. We're going to go through some stuff, but remember, I got us. And as long as there's time on the clock, there's time for us to win. That kind of attitude, that kind of energy is really powerful.
yeah.
Um, so those are some of the good things I've seen in coaching.
I love it. Great stuff. Um, your journey, those who maybe hadn't heard the first time you were on the podcast, we talked a little bit, but do share a little bit about what led you into doing this work and kind of what led you to here and writing books and working with pro athletes and all that. What,
Yeah, I was very curious about how life worked. Always the curious kid, raising my hand in class through grammar school, challenging the teacher, wanting to understand what we're doing here. Told this story many, many times, but the first time that I was camping and it was dark out and I looked up and I saw the canopy of stars that was above our head that filled the sky, I was blown away and was like, wow, like, how is that? Like, how do we not understand more of what we're doing here? Like, that's unbelievable. Like, you can't even wrap your mind around it. And now that we've seen the Hubble and the James T. Webb bring back photos, I mean, it's mind blowing. So that set me on this curiosity journey to really understand what the meaning of life was, some really deep existential questions, and it's in all three books, the story, but I was miraculously graced with the insight that led to so many of the answers to so many of my questions. Not all of them, but about 99% of them. This I felt to be a great honor, and I thought the only way to be a good, humble recipient of this honor was to share it in the public discourse and write these books and share how we connect with life and how life connects with us. And it led to all this change in people. And then I had athletes call me when they read I Am and say, this is what happened to my performance. Do you work with athletes? And that was a natural fit for me because I enjoy bringing this to mainstream. I don't, as I've said many times, I don't want to shave my head and put a robe on and go on a mountain. I want to bring this out to the general public or people who are interested. And so sports was a great segue. And then Invincible is just now a step-by-step formula for that mindset to optimize joy and peace and happiness and intuition and creative power, and all the things that are necessary for greatness in the world and to be great at whatever you're trying to do, you know.
you
So
said another one of my favorite words, joy, in there. What brings you the most joy in doing this?
seeing the twinkle in somebody's eye when you know that this information permeated the previous membrane of resistance and created this sense of transformation where they now see a more expansive version of themselves, respect themselves more, love themselves more, appreciate themselves more for the journey they've been on, and are more hopeful and inspired. That to me is the greatest gift of this work, is being able to see that moment of transformation.
Your energy is definitely contagious, even through a computer.
That's awesome.
No doubt. This is great. I love being able to chat with you. One of the things I mentioned we like to play here in your book jacket for this Invincible. There's several other podcast guests that we've had on here that are also some amazing people. But I'm gonna list off a name and just want you to describe them in one word. If it's good, we'll share it. If it's
Yeah.
bad, we'll edit it out. But
No problem.
the first one on there is an early guest, John Gordon.
John's infectious, um, energetic, joyful, positive. I mean, John walks his talk. I love
Yeah,
John Gordon. It's
great.
great.
Brandon Geyer.
Uh, resilient, gritty, competitor, tough,
Mm.
um, you know, good human being. Love Brandon.
And then Jeff Jansen.
Jeff is smart. Jeff is accomplished. Um, uh, Jeff Jeff has permeated the sports area with his work and leadership and his books, and another great human being in the sports area.
Love it. This one has not been on my podcast, but he did break my high school all-purpose yards record. And so hopefully I have him on the podcast someday. Great football player, Alan Lazard.
Alan Lazard, boy, he is high-minded. My, very spiritual person in just the way he is. He carries sort of an attitude of professionalism and belief and faith
Mm, love
that
that.
has taken him to where he's at.
Yeah,
And through all the challenges, not getting drafted, and then um, what he did in Green Bay was just amazing. And now he's working it out with the Jets, and obviously after signing a great contract for himself for his life.
yeah.
But Allen's a competitor and consummate professional.
That's awesome. I wish I had more of those
Yeah,
qualities
that's
when I especially when I went to high school.
it's
Yeah,
amazing all the crossover that we've had. It's incredible actually.
yeah, yeah. I was just back in Iowa, so I was recently. So yeah, it's cool to always see people that come
Yeah,
from where you come from and have some great success,
absolutely.
and then to hear, I think yeah, you see, I think what a great human. But I think there's a an athlete I was around would always say, be a great person, then a great athlete. And
Love that.
when you do it in that order, life is easier. When you try to do it the other
Perfect.
way, it can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
Coming back to football, what are some ways building mental strength? Um, Football teams, spend so much time training in the off season together, running, lifting in the weight room, outside, OTA type activities, and then your practices with our coaches. What are some ways that football players can work on and integrate mental skills into their physical training schedules that they do?
I think for football players, because it's such a trench, gritty, tough sport, to really just simply focus on the process of learning, and because there's so much time in between games, right? You don't have it's forever almost, it seems, to get to the season, and then there's weeks, in between games. Um, just to focus on the process and to lose themselves in that of being better and to let go as much as they can of all the politics and all the drama that can happen as it leads up to the week of a game. Am I going to play? Am I not going to play? Coaches want to do one main thing. They want to win,
Yeah,
and they're going to focus on the people they think can best help them win. So when you have an opportunity in practice to demonstrate who you are, don't shy away. I mean, you should be going all out in those practices to demonstrate that because that's what gets a coach's attention. They want to see someone who has this voracious energy in them. When football might be different from all the other sports in that, right? Because
yeah,
there's so much force in football. Um, but to really demonstrate and simulate as much as being in a game as you can during practice to demonstrate who you are, either to learn or to show that skill, that's what I would recommend. And then let the rest take care of itself. Let the rest take care of itself. And then, as we spoke about earlier, stay away from any negative thoughts about yourself.
yeah,
Trust the process. Develop a greater relationship with this universe that birthed you into existence and nurtured you to this point, right?
yeah.
Um, it's going to keep showing you, what you need to get to where you want to go, or the result of all the hard work that you've put in. It's going to keep nurturing that for you. So.
What are your sources that give you energy and
Mm.
fuel your positivity?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say my wife, who's an incredible life partner with me on this journey. So she's been an unbelievable rock of faith through the whole process of, the quiet time in writing when you don't know whether or not, how your book's going to come out and all the stuff that goes into getting a book published and put out in the world through a publisher. And all the sacrifices that have to be made to do that. People don't know that, they see like in sport, they see everybody under the lights, but they don't see all the work that goes into it.
Yeah,
So that's definitely a source. The Tao for me is the ultimate go-to in life. Tao Te Ching. It's just the 60 some verses are just the most beautiful, simplistic, and powerful way of looking at how powerful life is and our connection to it. So that's a very grounding work for me. And then any great wisdom in the world that is great at offering the power of divinity, the love that comes from it, the unconditional love that comes from it, and grounding myself in that, whether it's scripture, whether it's philosophy. Truth is truth, and I appreciate and respect all of it. And so that's where I go to. And then silence. I like going into the silence at times to get recentered.
Yeah.
If I need to, I'll get, And then one last go to I'll give you,
Yeah.
music.
All right. All right. Tell me more.
Some I just think music, is the great poetry in motion, right? It's poetry smashed with energy, and it comes out in this beautiful symphony, pun intended sometimes,
Yeah.
but you know, uplifting music.
Yeah.
There's times when you want it to be a little rougher, but even some of the heavier stuff can be uplifting. So lyrics are really important to me in
Yeah.
music, and anything that's uplifting and has a good energy and beat. I can go on a run and I can be 10x of what I would normally be with my headphones plugged in on a good playlist.
Yeah.
It just fuels
For
you.
sure. For
So
sure.
I love a great playlist,
Yeah.
that just keeps rocking one after
Yeah.
the other.
For
My
sure.
car is like my bubble. When I'm in that car, it's on 10 and
Are
I'm
you
screaming it.
are you singing? I was gonna say,
Oh
are you
yeah.
singing in there? You
Oh yeah. Are you
ro
kidding?
rolling up next to you like an office space. If you like,
Yeah.
uh,
And
no,
it's all 70s and 80s stuff.
there you go. Some
Early 80s. I want
okay,
to really
like ha
distinguish that.
like hair bands or
No,
no? What
that's
do we?
late
They
80s.
okay,
That's
okay.
where it got wrecked. Okay. Let's stick to like from 67, I should say late 60s, 67 through like 85, right there. That's
That's a
the
sweet
cutoff
spot.
for me. Yeah,
That's a sweet spot for sure.
definitely.
No, I think yeah, music. I think with sports and athletes, they've always got a playlist, something that gets them going, and yeah, like you said, it can be a great source. But I agree, lyrics can be important. So it might be, the repetitive things, even unconsciously, start to chip away
Yeah.
at some of what our
I'll tell
capacities
you
are.
a quick story on that. When
Please,
I was
yeah.
in junior high and high school, I wrestled. And I'll never forget my wrestling coach, one of the greatest coaches I ever had, changed my life. His name was Vic DiPrizio. And I think he actually went on to be a principal in the Chicago suburbs. But Vic had this thing where at the end of wrestling practice, I mean, and we went at it hard in wrestling practice. We were soaked.
Yeah,
And at the end, he would shut the lights off and we'd all lay down on the mat. And I'm probably 14 years old. And at the end of every practice, he played We Will Rock You. And we would hit the mats, boom, 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 by Queen, We Will Rock You. And we'd all do that. And then after that song, we all put our hands down on the mat. Nobody would move. We'd all shut our eyes and he would let We Are the Champions play. And it would just soak into our brains for an entire season.
yeah,
We went undefeated, never
yeah,
lost a match
yeah. No,
as a team.
I think I think that's even tapping into, I think, yeah, the kind of when you create that just musical together, that pounding, with your team, there's a different tapping into a different energy of human connection,
Exactly.
for sure. So that's an awesome story. Sounds like
Yeah.
a wrestling team I wish I was on.
It
I would
was
impress.
fun.
Nice. I love it. Well, thanks for joining the podcast. Can't wait to dive into the full book. Tell everybody where they
Awesome.
can find it. Where
Yeah.
can they find you? And we'll
So
get it all also linked up in the show notes.
sure. So Invincible, you can get on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or any independent bookstore. And if it's not there, let them know that Invincible needs to be in the store. And then my website is howardfalco.com or totalmindsports.com. And you can find me and all my daily work and posts and inspiration on Instagram under my name, Howard Falco. That's where you can find me in the world.